foster inclusive knowledge societies. And this concept of knowledge societies is very dear to UNESCO, and I have to say very dear to me personally. At the time, I was the Minister for Higher Education, Science and Technology of Mozambique in 2003, and we were talking about an information society. And coming from Mozambique, I didn't like the concept. I felt that when we talked about information and then the knowledge economy, we were using knowledge to exclude less developed countries. And I was very much behind, as a government, a member state of UNESCO, in pushing the concept of knowledge societies. Because if the society is about knowledge, then indeed we are all empowered to make our choices. And the choices that are good for us, the choices that are good for our communities, our societies, and the choices that are good for the different societies in the world. So it's really a privilege to me as the head of delegation of UNESCO in this forum, and as the regional director for science in the Latin America and the Caribbean region for UNESCO, to really manage and share this session where the concept of knowledge societies are more than ever alive. They are more than ever important. This study was requested from our member states in our 37th General Conference, so 2 years ago. And the idea was to say, okay, in the areas of UNESCO, how can we really make sure that access to information and knowledge, freedom of expression, privacy, ethics on the global internet can be analyzed and understood in order to empower our societies and the global society as a whole. The way it will work, I will have my colleague Xiang Hong to present the report briefly, and then we are very privileged to have very interesting and very prestigious members in the panel that will bring their perspectives. Is the report interesting? Does it bring something new? Are there gaps that we didn't cover in the report? How can we improve this reflection about how to foster inclusive knowledge societies? So I'm the timekeeper. We are asking our speakers to speak for 3 minutes, because this is a short session, so that we can then also have your input, okay? And let's try to make it as interactive as you can. So welcome again, and I pass the floor to you.
Thank you, Lydia. Although it's the last day of IGF, I think this study is presented in exactly at the right time, in the right place, because on Monday, UNESCO General Conference CI Commission has just endorsed this internet study, and the member states are happy with the options we have presented in this study, so it will fly. And in the right locations means that the actual study was mandated by a resolution, as Lydia mentioned 2 years ago. And that resolution was really proposed by a group country led by Brazil and Germany. So it's really pleasure to present this study in Brazil as well. We finally got it endorsed. So I will talk more about the process in this presentation, because for us, it's not an academic research, but a policy study. The idea is the process does matter to justify the results. And in that resolution 2 years ago, we are mandated to go through a multi-stakeholder process and look at the UNESCO niche, UNESCO-related area of internet governance, because it's very broad. We couldn't take all, but just some specific area. As Lydia mentioned, the knowledge society. Knowledge society is a UNESCO vision of society, of internet governance. So 4 areas our member states have requested was access to information and knowledge. It's free expression is our traditional mandate. Now we define the free expression online, offline together. And third one, privacy is a really new mandate we're taking, because we look at privacy as must condition to other fundamental freedom, including free expression, and fourth, the ethical dimension of information society. Look at these puzzles. The puzzle is our new concept, Internet universality, which UNESCO positioned itself in the Internet ecosystem. We are promoting an Internet based on human rights, Internet open in terms also technology and market. We call for Internet accessible to all, and all this process should be driven by a multi-stakeholder participation. The process was going on for 2 years. We started with 8 consultation meetings with member states. We organized 5 regional group consultation with our governments, plus the G77 and the China consultation meeting, and also European Commission. Building on this consultation, we have launched a global questionnaire. We have received 200 substantial responses to that. I also like to mention we have run a very successful regional consultation in Latin America, led by the Montevideo office, as Lydia was supervising. That we received so many local contributions to the questionnaire. Plus, we are presenting the concept note in plenty multi-stakeholder events to take in all the comments there. And the process culminated at the Connecting Dots conference. I think some of you were there. And we had 400 different stakeholder participants. They have looked at the first draft, which had led to the final version. We just distributing here. Okay. The conclusion. First, the study helped to identify the different roles for different stakeholders in terms of their tasks in the Internet governance. For IGOs like UNESCO, we remain relevant to hold our governments to shape the global standard setting on Internet governance. For the users, even for intermediaries, we also have a study on that. We are also working with companies to hold the company responsible and to respect the human rights. And the principle of Internet universality is very important. And we are using this framework to envision UNESCO's future work in this domain. Shall I speed up, Lydia? Okay. So the conclusion exactly is a starting point. We are concluding 38 options for UNESCO's future actions, which is on the page 101. And this study, that's really a core issues we are going to discuss here, I believe, because it's already been endorsed by our governments, but we really need to implement it in the forthcoming years. And this is just showcasing that what I said, that it's under Internet universality framework. Under this resolution, we are conducting so many semantic studies to inform the policymakers. Also, I'd like to share a web page to see that we have reviewed 55 international declarations on Internet governance as a policy observatory. So for the future discussion, including here, that we like to discuss how we implement them, and shall we consider developing indicators to measure Internet universality and Internet governance? So that's basic the study is about. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you very much, Jean, for maintaining the time also. I think we don't have all the speakers, so I will start in the order as they are here, but then I may bring other people. You can sit in the table. We are not that many. Let's make it a conversation, a more closed conversation, and don't stay in the back, because it's a very big room for so not much people. Our first speaker then would be Joseph Kanatassi. Joseph is the UN Special Rapporteur on rights to privacy, a very central issue in this report. And definitely, Joseph, how do you see this, and how How would be your recommendations in terms of how can UNESCO advance this agenda?
Yes, I think that I should point out that I was actually very pleased when I saw the report, with which I had nothing to do, I should make clear, but which reflects a number of ideas which I have expressed in the past, over the past 10 years or so. If you look at page 16 of the report and the table 1, where you have the 4 keystone fields of focus, and this is something which I was also talking about in the panel I have just participated in barely an hour ago, where these fundamental rights, because to a certain extent, if you look at the first 3 keystones, and I'll read out for the benefit of those people, even those watching online, who don't have the text in front of them. But the first keystone is access to information and knowledge. And the second one is freedom of expression, and the third one is privacy. And what I'd like to explore here, more than privacy on its own, is actually the interaction of these 3 and the extent to which these may not be an end to themselves. There is an idea, and you have asked also, Lydia, where things which are missing from the report and which you might want to consider. I have in other areas explored, or just begun to explore, the extent to which we need to ask the question, why do we have the right to privacy? Why do we have the freedom of expression? Because is it an end in itself, or is the means to an end? And the means to an end that I would like to suggest that we consider is that there should be a discussion on a fundamental, on an overarching fundamental right. Something which has not taken place worldwide, something which has not even taken place in Europe. And this overarching right that I'd like to describe is the right to free, unhindered development of personality, right? Because to me, those rights which are fundamental rights, like the right to privacy, like the right to freedom of expression, like the right to access to information, these remind me of what my grandmother used to cook on. Right? And my grandmother used to cook on a pot on a tripod, and the tripod has 3 legs. And to me, these 3 rights are the 3 legs of the tripod. Obviously, then if you had a more sophisticated pot
number of reasons, but one of which has been the focus on the access and connectivity portion of the internet governance work as a noble or important goal in its own right. But I think one of the things the UNESCO report does well is putting that in context and reminding us about what's at stake. To everyone in this room, the internet is, something we all take for granted. And in large part, it's been tremendously successful, right? There are 2 billion people on the internet in over 100 countries. The problem is if you do a Wikipedia search and find the denominator for that number, it's that we have 4.5 billion people still unconnected, 60% of the world's population. And that's just simply unacceptable. The only way we're going to continue to have a vibrant, thriving knowledge society is to get everyone online everywhere. That's a very maximalist goal, and it's a long-term goal, but that brings me to my second point, which is I think one of the important things that this report embraces fully, it's that, I'm talking about the connectivity portion of this, but I think it's equally relevant to the other portions. It's that governments have a vitally important role to play in many aspects of this, but they are one important player. And that whether we're talking about connectivity and what can the private sector do to sort of innovate and iterate to solve the challenge, or what can civil society do to sort of keep everyone grounded on a very data-driven, results-oriented approach to solving this problem, governments have a role here too, to create an enabling environment. And so I think, looking at the report as a whole, I think what I would say is that it's tremendous value to see something come out now that's looking at this holistically, but in a context that I think is very familiar to everyone here, but is not necessarily very evident to people outside of the internet governance community. So I commend you all for that.
Very much, Will, for this and our next speaker. And I'm very happy because now I'm coming to the female speakers because, gender balance sometimes is not easy in these forums. But we did pretty well this time. So I will start with Veridiana Alimonti. She's a lawyer from Brazil Social Communication Collective, and I think you also have been involved in the Intervoices and so on. So give me the perspective of civil society and in these movements.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And as Lydia said, I'm from Intervoices, which is a Brazilian civil society organization that since 2003 fights for a more diverse media and the human rights protection in all ICT. So first of all, I would like to stress the suitability of our debate's ground zero, which is how to foster inclusive knowledge societies, which is much more than connected societies. As the document says, knowledge societies are those that enables people to not only have the ability to access information and resources from around the world, but to also contribute information and knowledge to local and global communities. Regarding this ultimate goal and key rights related to UNESCO mandates such as freedom of expression, cultural diversity, and education, my first comment is that net neutrality issues should be considered as part of this UNESCO mandate, especially because this debate has to be done taking into regard all these rights and not only economic and technical approaches. The document is not silent in relation to this issue. However, in my view, this discussion will be undermined if UNESCO cannot engage more concretely in promoting the guarantee of net neutrality as a crucial element for ensuring the rights within its mandate. One important matter related to net neutrality and universal internet access debate is the fact that the linking device for most individuals coming online in the current period is the mobile phone. Besides the concerns already pointed out by UNESCO at this document regarding geolocation, privacy, security, and terms of service of software apps, the enthusiasm with such access statistics have to be balanced with two other concerns. First, the broadband access in mobile devices follows much more a telecommunications logic, billing, according to how many bits you've consumed, what unfolds in high prices data caps, especially in developing countries, and the zero rating discussion is directly related to this, instead of an internet logic. where you hire a transmission capacity. An interesting way to deal with this is fostering Wi-Fi policies and investments, related also to more democratic and distributed spectrum allocation. Second, in the mobile use of the internet, accessing web is secondary in comparison with apps. Depending on how these apps are developed and their use is carried out, the internet we know today can be replaced by an amount of walled gardens. And what I wanted to discuss and hear from the other participants is about how UNESCO is doing this and can foster this discussion about how to deal with hate speech in a internet environment and in a right environment, and not the internet being taken as a dangerous place, and how this is an important discussion related also with the privacy concerns. So to finish, I would like to agree with those that defend that the UNESCO role in connecting the dots amongst internet stakeholders as a trusted broker, helping to build partnerships and dialogue among the stakeholder communities. And this is crucial to advance in national and international legislation, as well as corporation best practices, besides avoiding setbacks. About setbacks, I want to take the opportunity to publicize the link of a video about current threats to Marco Civil, our internet civil rights framework. The video that we are going to watch at the end, if you have time, can be find at the shortened link bit.ly/spybill video. Thanks.
Thank you very much, and I do hope that we will have a minute after the end of the session to indeed see the film that you wanted to show to us before. Our next speaker is Christine Monti. She is the official of the Directorate General for Communication Network, Content and Technology, DG Connect at the European Commission. Give us your perspective also from the European Commission perspective, because you have done a lot of also studies on these areas. And how do you see these studies also, bringing together important action plans for us?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to join the other panelists in thanking UNESCO for this very interesting and comprehensive study. I think it's also worth recognizing that UNESCO, even though it's an organization where the members are governments, still made the effort to enlarge and consult with other stakeholders, so effectively using the multi-stakeholder model also to advance on this issue. So I think this is something valuable. And then on your question, I think, yes, the European Commission and the European Union in general has done a lot of studies on these issues, but also beyond that, we are also starting making laws, regulations that are rules in 28 member states. And I think it's important maybe to highlight that what the study acknowledges is that internet is a common good for humanity. And this is exactly what Vice President of the European Commission responsible for the digital single market just said here at the opening session of this IGF. And also the fact that good governance of the internet will help bring the benefit of the internet to everybody in the world. And good governance can only be based on shared and common principles that are future-proof, that do not depend on a specific technology, as we know that technology can change so quickly. So we really need common values, principles on which we can build. And many of the principles that we see here, I think, are very in line with what was also agreed broadly by the international community on Net Mundial, also here in Brazil. So the Net Mundial principles also are perfectly in line with what is in this report. Because after all, we are talking about fundamental freedoms and human rights. And from a European Union perspective, these rights are enshrined in our rules, in everything that we try to do. Again, I would like to highlight that Vice President Ansip here also said that the new, let's say, agenda for Europe, which is the digital single market strategy, is based on the Net Mundial principles and on these fundamental freedoms and human rights. On many of these issues, we already have legislation or will soon have legislation, like on the net neutrality issue, which is now going to become a reality, a rule in 28 member states. And on other issues like the data protection reform, which is also something very, very important, and we are aiming at having a concrete legislation by the end of the year. Maybe one other aspect I would like to highlight is that, of course, it's very important to talk about principles. One thing is that maybe we shouldn't forget that we also need to ensure the security and the stability of the internet, because without that we can talk about freedom of expression, access and so on, but if you don't have this physical access, if this access is disrupted for whatever reason, then we really have a problem. Also because our societies rely so much on the internet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina, for bringing that perspective. And our next speaker is Mark Rothenberg. Mark is the president and executive director of the Electronic Privacy Information Center. Again, a no-profit research center in Washington, also privacy-related. How do you see this report, Mark, and what are the issues that you would bring forward? Thank you.
Thank you. Privacy seems to be a popular topic today. And I wanted to thank UNESCO for the opportunity to participate in the discussion. I was just looking online and I found that I participated first in 1998 in a panel on infoethics for UNESCO when we first started the discussion. But things have come a long way, and it's a very substantial report, a very important report, and I'd like to congratulate you on the publication. There's nothing here, at least that I've read so far, that I would disagree with. I think the main comment I would make is that I think there's still a lot more to do, and I would use as a reference document in the privacy field a declaration that was put together by NGOs and experts in 2009 called the Madrid Privacy Declaration. I think you can find this easily online if you look. I prefer to say look rather than Google. If you look for the Madrid Privacy Declaration, I think you will find it online. The title of the declaration is Global Privacy Standards for a Global World. And I'll read just a few excerpts. Some of this will actually be familiar. So the very first sentence in the Madrid Declaration is affirming that privacy is a fundamental human right set out in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and other human rights instruments and national constitutions. And then it goes on to talk about other important international instruments. But this opening section ends in a very significant way, particularly for this report. The section ends warning that the failure to safeguard privacy jeopardizes associated freedoms, including freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of access to information, non-discrimination, and ultimately the stability of constitutional democracies. So the Madrid Privacy Declaration tries to recognize the interrelated nature of the various human rights that are so very important to safeguard the individual. And then there are a series of 10 recommendations. They're each actually quite concrete, but I'm just going to take a moment on the last declaration, which I think is very timely following the decision of the European Court of Justice, which many of you may be familiar with, the case by Max Schrems concerning the safe harbor arrangement between the European Union and the United States, which in effect tried to substitute a self-regulatory framework of trade policy for a system of law that protected fundamental rights. And the European Court of Justice concluded that this violated the Charter of Fundamental Rights as well as the EU Data Protection Directive. And the question that is raised now is not only what is the future of data flows between the US and the EU, but also all around the world. because we all confront these issues in our interconnected economies and societies. So this is the final recommendation from 2009 from the Madrid Privacy Declaration, which I think has been given greater resonance because of the recent decision of the Court of Justice. The declaration calls for the establishment of a new international framework for privacy protection with the full participation of civil society that is based on the rule of law, respect for fundamental human rights, and support for democratic institutions.
Thank you very much, Mark, and also for bringing some of the instruments that are already there. That idea is not to invent something, but really build in what has been already proposed, and there's a consensus from different stakeholders. My next speaker is Stefan Verhulst. He's a co-founder and chief research and development officer of the governance laboratory, the GovLab, in New York. And again, in your perspective, and you have been involved with the UNESCO in several ways, and how do you look at this report from your perspective also of governance, and how can we really make sure that the report can impact beyond even its reach?
Thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be here. Having been a UNESCO chair when I was at Oxford University, I'm always delighted to be back with UNESCO colleagues at the table, and especially focusing on a document that is extremely rich and dense to a large extent to consume, because it is all-encompassing, and it is really a amazing taking stock of the issues that we currently are dealing with. And so I will only focus on 4 elements that in order to limit the time, and I will start with what I think is probably the most pronounced statement of the report, which is on page 82 on the conclusions. The first line, which basically says technologies and their use are not value free. And I think that basically encompasses the whole report. I mean, the whole report to a large extent is about different values that are embedded in technology, in the design of technology and the use of technology, and that those different values ultimately not always match each other, and that there is a battle going on quite often between the values, and that there is an effort going on in order to at least make sure that the values to a large extent are balanced to a large extent. And there are 2 elements here that are important to take away, and especially 2 elements that perhaps the report should have emphasized more. One is that exactly the design of technology is not value neutral. And so it would have been important probably for the report to also start reflecting on how is technology actually designed? How do companies like Google and others structure their services, which have major implications for all of the 4 keystones that were mentioned. They have implications for free speech, they have implications for accessibility, they have implications for ethics and privacy. And I think that element of values in design is an element that is important underscoring. The second element is that because there are a diversity of values involved, and because the values actually do have equal value quite often, it's very important to have an adequate process that mitigates and integrates the variety of points of view and the different kinds of values that are embedded with the technology. And so multi-stakeholdership is now, of course, generally being adhered and promoted, but I would say we need to go to the next level. We need to look into what is multi-stakeholdership in the 21st century, what does co-creation of solutions mean in the 21st century, and where can we actually start using technology to go beyond the multi-stakeholdership, which quite often is very messy, requires a convention center like that, and can actually be done in different ways as well, in a more innovative way. And I think that's another element. The second point I want to make is that the focus of the report is on knowledge societies, but to a large extent we are really moving towards knowledge societies that are data-driven. And I would have hoped that the report was somewhat more focused on the importance and the creation and the abundance of data to a large extent, and it has implications again for the 4 keystones. First of all, I think it's crucial to start thinking about access to data, access to open government data, but also access to corporate data for public good. And I think it's becoming key to start reflecting on corporations have huge amounts of data that quite often is collected through society and through the use of their services, how can they actually open up the data under certain conditions in order to serve actually society and give back. And I think having access to corporate data and government data is a key element that needs to be looked at. Second element with data is a free expression. Given the fact that algorithmic editing is going to become more and more prevalent, has a huge implication for actually free expression. And so the concept of how do algorithms make editorial decisions and how does that impact free expression is an element that I would put on the table here, especially for UNESCO to address, given the UNESCO's mission that is out there. Privacy, clearly there are huge elements of privacy consideration with regard to data, and we need to, as Mark and Joe have indicated, we need to start thinking about new concepts, especially concepts that embed data in the privacy approach that requires some kind of a framework. And I would say the biggest ethical challenge that we have right now is data ethics. And I think, how do we establish a new practice of data ethics that really start thinking about the implications of the use of data and the negative kind of discrimination that might happen as a result of the use of and the prevalent use of data has become critical and needs to be considered in sync with the privacy considerations, but they are not the same, and I think that's involved. And the last element, the fourth element that I want to make, is that the report indicates that internet governance becomes more and more complex, and towards that end we need more and more efforts to actually start mapping the variety of issues and mapping especially the connections to those issues. And so yesterday there was a session on observatories and mapping efforts. We having one which is called the Net Mondial Solutions Map. The European Commission has one which is called JIPO, and we're starting to work together more and more. And so given the complexity that was reflected in the report, we also see the value of those efforts more and more underscored. And so these are my four interventions I wanted to make. Obviously, it's a very dense report, and I think everyone could probably make comments on every single page that was made, so I'm going to keep it to there.
Thank you very much, and I think we are going to open now in the time that we have left to you, and I know that you want to speak, Mark, so you can take the floor now, and then we have another one, and let's make it a
Yes, just for the record, I'm Patrick Pennings from the Council of Europe, Head of Information Society Department. I just, well, first of all, congratulations for the report and putting this panel together. I can testify because we have contributed very strongly to the report, and we know that has taken a lot of time and effort to produce it, and it took a lot of time and effort to respond to the many questions that were raised, and a lot of intelligence and input there. If you don't mind, if I would like to take up the elements of some of your speakers. First of all, Joe, I think you hit the nail on the head, so to say, when we say this is about the right to free and unhindered development. I would add something to that, in a free and democratic society, because that is what we are also aiming for. It's not the individual as such, it's the individual in a society, where by nature human beings are social beings, and we need to be able to see our development in this global, in this context. That is just a first reflection. Just also to respond to Mark Rothenberg. Mark, we brought Max Schrems to the IGF. We had the open forum where we thought it was important that after such an important decision, we would be able to exchange directly with one of the litigators or the litigator in this question. And when you say, and come back to the Madrid Declaration, I think it's important to recall that we have a global instrument, and it's the Council of Europe Data Protection Convention, Convention 108. It's an open it's an open convention. It's a global convention. We have a number of states. This week there is Tunisia, who is requesting to accede to the convention. We have had requests from Mexico, we have requests from Africa, from Latin America, we've had a number of interactions worldwide, and I think the Schrems case clearly identifies that it's not sufficient to have how much importance we also give to the EU. It's not sufficient to have an EU regulation and a business agreement with a number of countries. It is important to regulate things at a more global level. And I think what Stefan was also saying.
Can I ask you just to be short, because I do have some.
Okay, the design of technology is indeed not neutral. And we will be looking at specifically, on the one side, how algorithms are constructed. I think it's one of the key elements of privacy and data protection and orientation, free speech for the future. So we will be looking into that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that contribution. I think I have the speakers also that are on the other chairs. You can use also the microphones or move to the table, okay?
Good afternoon, everybody. For the record, my name is Subhi Chaturvedi. I'm a member of the MAG from India, and I've been a professor of communication at Delhi University. I want to start by congratulating Ms. Hu for putting together a fantastic report and recognizing everybody whose work has gone into it. I want to speak to 3 specific points. I see 4 cornerstones, ethics, but with that, one would also like to see digital trust, which is at the heart of the conversation. I also want to re-emphasize the importance of carrying on this conversation. It is very important for us to see in UNESCO the kind of amplification that happens, whether it is issues of education or access, and the kind of influence you carry with governments worldwide. With civil societies and academia, it is a constant struggle to get attention, and this is a powerful platform to bring together these issues. The third is the importance of national and regional initiatives. So I hear that there was one regional consultation in Latin America. I think because the internet changes as we speak, and there are many issues that will emerge as far as the Internet of Things are concerned, many issues when it comes to connecting not just the next billion, but also the disenfranchised. So we're looking at issues of sovereignty, we're looking at issues of developing countries and underrepresented stakeholder groups. And UNESCO is a wonderful platform which is neutral, which is acceptable to all. So this work must continue and carry on, and we look forward to contributing to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sunny. I think we have more comments, participations, ideas. Otherwise, I may go to our panel again, and we are finishing. So if there is one message that you would like to leave to us as we finish this panel, what would be? I would start with you and then go around.
The message, it will be to the UNESCO continue to play its role with unmoved stakeholder participation in constructing, building these bridges and this document, having always in the horizon the idea of the knowledge societies in a completely way.
Very briefly, I think I would just say the takeaway for me is that we've come a long way, but we've a tremendously far way to go, and we're only going to get there if we do it together. So,
thanks.
So my message would be to, as also page 82 says, these are principles, and so how do we move from principles to actions? And I think that's going to be the key element, especially thinking about doing this in a innovative way. I mean, there's a lot of, throughout the report, there's a lot of reference to the need for regulation, but there are different ways to actually go about meeting the objectives. Meaning we have behavioral science that you can apply, we have design principles that you can apply, you have funding mechanisms, you have procurement references, all elements that ultimately quite often are ignored in thinking about how do you actually take those principles and turn them into something that is meaningful beyond thinking about new law and new kind of policies that you might have there.
Thank you very much. I think we have one last speaker. Please, very short, because we are out of time.
Okay, it's really short. I'm Paulo César. I'm from here, Brazil, and I'm representing youth at IGF. And I think this is really important because UNESCO is doing something really important with the young people. There's in Paris last month, they're including the young people, and here at IGF, they're also including this kind of conversation. And there's the government and there's the young people. I think this conversation here and also that is happening, this is really important. I think this is really grateful. So thank you.
Thank you very much. You were referring to our youth forum that just took place 2 days before our general conference, and really a very nice forum because it was on environment, and it was interesting that also technology and the internet came about. So clearly it's important. Can I give you the floor also?
Thank you. I think I have a multiple messages to deliver. First, I want to thank our panelists and also our stakeholders who has provided substantial contribution to that questionnaire. Remember, Council Europe gave us 15 pages, and also many other stakeholders. Really much appreciated. And the second, we are in the moment to plan for the next biennium program of UNESCO. So this study, yes, is a reference for us to guide our actions for the future. I mean, even for next year, for January. I have heard that your suggestions, which are quite in line with what we are thought. For example, the network neutrality. Neutrality issue was already mentioned by our member states. They really want us to do it, to look at it from human rights aspect. It will be on our agenda. So algorithm, I mean, online free expression is so complicated now. It's really impacted by all kind of different technical solutions. So we are also looking into these issues. And of course, I appreciate those so many instruments. We are happening every day. We are creating a web page. We are trying to harmonize the different values, different frameworks. Because UNESCO, the value is that we are international. We have 195 member states. We're trying to bring in the voice from all regions and also from South, because the gap is still there and the issues are different, priorities are different, particularly in looking into the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. That it's a really a good starting point to go into the next phase of the development.
Thank you. Mark, can I ask you for your last message?
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I mean, first to the Council of Europe question, I just wanted to say the Madrid Declaration says, urge countries that have not ratified Convention 108 to do so as expeditiously as possible. So we covered that. And to your second point, I agree entirely. Our next big focus should be algorithmic transparency. We need to make transparent and hold accountable the basis of automated decision making. I think that's one of the great challenges we face.
Joe?
Yes, thank you. I'd just like to say that for those people who, when Dr. Xianhong Hu was referring to what is being planned for the next 2 years forward, UNESCO offers the advantage of the ability, the institutionalized ability to provide further structure and assistance for the dialogue. And one of the things that therefore I would immediately invite UNESCO to do is to participate in a large multi-stakeholder conference we shall be organizing in October in 2016, together also with Human Rights Watch and probably the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression and other of the keystones you have there, which will deal precisely and focus on the right to unhindered development of personality, hopefully in a free society. I just would like to point out that even those people who don't live in free democratic societies also deserve a right to the free and unhindered development of personality, which is why they will probably like to make the transition from not free to free, or truly free. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe, and also thank you for the invitation for us to participate. I'm sure that we'll be riding along with you and other special rapporteurs on this very central topic and a very central human right, and I would say a child and youth rights. Nigel?
Yes, thank you very much, and just very briefly, thank you as well to UNESCO. I suppose my message will be just please continue with what you're doing. Please develop. I know it's complex, it's difficult, but your membership is so wide. The people you involve in your processes is so comprehensive, and we are all in this together, as others have said. So congratulations.
Tina?
Thank you. I guess my message, or more a suggestion, would be focus on the most vulnerable groups, on the women, on the children, on the elderly. Go on and contribute to the protection of cultural and linguistic diversity, promote multilingualism, so as to avoid that the digital gap grows, and so that we can also, ensure digital inclusion.
Thank you very much, and indeed is all the strong messages. Yes, please.
Sorry, just 1 minute video before the break. Okay.
But let me just finish, if you don't mind, as I shared, and then we can have your movie. Well, thank you again to all of you. I think we have listened, and we know that there is a lot to do, in particular with implementation and going from principles to real actions, and also to take the key issues. And like you said, don't look just the tripod, look to the what it results on. So thank you very much to our panelists. I would propose a round of applause to them. And really thank you to you, because you stayed here, you came to this very strange room. So keep coming to UNESCO sessions, keep going to our websites. We are constantly producing new information. And clearly this idea of the new indicators, the internet indicators, to really measure the human rights approach in internet, the openness of internet, the accessibility of internet, and the multi-stakeholder approach in internet is our biggest challenge now, and we will need the consultation. And this time our member states said in the 6 languages of the organization, in all the regions, all stakeholders. So prepare yourselves, because we will come back to you to make sure that together we can construct indicators that help us, and governments and companies and civil society, really to assess progress and to make sure that it's not only a dream, it's not only principles, but that become reality, building really a just knowledge society everywhere in the world. So thank you very much, and then now, yes, can we have the movie, and who can stay, please stay for 1 minute to see Intervoces Voices movie.
Ibidin movie.
The Brazilian Marco Civil da Internet is a global reference in netizens' rights and protection. But that could all change depending on what is decided in the National Congress. The draft bill 215/2015, known as PL Espião in Portuguese, or the Spying Bill in English, includes proposals that give police freedom to search emails, video chats and browsing histories without a warrant, and give out punishments 5-fold larger for any crime when committed through the internet. After strong pressure from civil liberties movements in defence of the Marco Civil, the bill was amended, but serious problems persist. Firstly, when using internet services like email, WhatsApp, Facebook and games, Brazilians will have to inform their full name, phone, email and taxpayer details, and without the approval of a judge, these data could be transferred to the government. Secondly, any elected politician would have the right to remove online content they think harms their reputation. If passed, the Spying Bill will open the door for political abuse and create a climate of fear for internet users. The Brazilian Chamber of Deputies, led by Eduardo Cunha, is moving fast to turn the bill into law, which is ready to be voted at any moment. Learn more at plsbl.org.br.